Okay, so if everyone could please take their seats, that would be great. Whoa, the power I feel. I just got what you're talking about.
We might have to do that.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. All right.
Did you say you turned them down?
I asked Maria to turn the speakers down.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Morning, everyone. Welcome to our Strategy Operations and Finance Committee meeting of the 13th of February. To elected members, both councillors, community board members and chairs, and also to staff and members of the public joining us today to either speak or listen in. Thanks for being here. Item number 2, our council blessing. I'm happy to read this. E a mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aro. E pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara huapai mo ngā hapore e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi, mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha. Cool. Moving on to apologies. We've received one apology from Kim Tahiwi of Ngā Hapua Ōtaki and also Cam Butler, Chair of the Ōtaki Community Board. I'll move that those apologies be accepted. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Warwick. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Item number 4, declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. Haven't been made aware of any, so moving swiftly on. Public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. So we've got 3 public speakers this morning, all speaking to item 9.1, which is Councillor Cooper's notice of motion. First up, Isabel Malarat. Morena Isabel, if you just press the button on the right-hand side of your mic, that would be great. Awesome. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors and chair. Thank you for having me speak. It was not my intention to speak today, but rather our spokesperson for CALM, Tanya, was meant to be speaking to the motion being put forward by Councillor Cooper in relation to the Waikato report being placed on our limbs. But there's been some confusion around the change of that motion and the date at which council will properly address it. So our official statement has been deferred, as Councillor Cooper's motion has, to the council meeting in March. The date of that meeting is still unclear, maybe the 6th or the one later in March. No one seems to be clear on that. In fact, no one seems to be clear on anything at this stage, so this is why I'm taking this opportunity in Tanya's absence. In Councillor Cooper's Facebook post, he stated he was bringing a motion to council today in relation to the Waikato report by Dr. DeLonghi, and to quote, directing the council to put the report on limbs. But the motion on the agenda is quite different, and apparently due to the chief executive claiming you don't have enough time to put together adequate advice to give councillors direction. I would think maybe that could be considered as interfering with elected officials' business. As council has had the Waikato report for quite some time, I would have thought you have already had adequate advice in relation to this. I know under the rules that I'm not allowed to ask questions at public speaking, but I want to express my concerns here and now. To change the motion and now Crew's announcement of a judicial review raises grave concerns around the council's process and their desire to waste ratepayers' money. Sorry, that's all.
Great, thank you, Isabel. And just to clarify, the report is likely to come to the meeting on the 6th of March.
It is
the council
6th,
meeting on the 6th,
you.
yeah, so you can report that back.
Okay.
Any questions from the table?
Could I
Councillor Halliday?
just going to ask for a point of clarity. There's talk here of a motion being changed, but I'm aware that the motion that came into the report on Friday, which is our statutory time. That hasn't been changed, has it?
No.
No.
The report, the notice of motion that's in the report
Yeah.
is the one that we're discussing
So nothing's,
today.
with regards to reports that have come to the table, nothing's really been changed.
If you wanted to ask Isabel for specific
Oh.
clarity on what she was referring to with regards to
I
the
just
change.
sort of someone getting clarity around, because I appreciate what's being said with regards to information coming back. But we get our agendas 5 days before council meetings. We usually get them on the Friday before.
Yeah.
So with regards to your comment, I'm not aware necessarily of what you're referring to, because we've got a motion in front of us that's come from Glenn Cooper, who will speak to it at the when we get to it on our agenda. But I'm not aware that anything's changed from that motion.
Well, that may be a question for Glenn, because the interpretation we took from his comment that he'll be that the motion would be directing the council to put the report on the LIMS seems quite different to the wording that is actually on the motion.
Fair enough. No, I'm sure that'll be
So-
clarified perhaps. when we
So
come to
that is, maybe we've interpreted that wrong, but that is the way a lot of people interpreted that
that
Okay.
post.
at
Thanks
the
for the-
time.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks for the
lovely.
question,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Halliday. I think probably useful if that's clarified in the introduction to the notice of motion, Councillor Cooper.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great.
That's great. No, that's
Thank
thank
you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you,
Thank you.
Isabel. I'm not seeing any other questions. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for coming along. Oh, you can leave. Yeah, you can leave the mic on. Next up, we've got Jeff Ashby.
Morena.
Morena, Jeff.
Hi. I was planning to talk to Glenn's motion, but I understand there's a bit of confusion there, what's going on. So anyway, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I have a doctorate in geology. 1974, I first looked at the sediment movement in the Waikanae Estuary as an undergraduate with Victoria University. 1986, moved to the Kapiti Coast. I was very active in the early days of the Shand Report and after John Lumsden's days. That's 10, 12 years ago. Very, very active in crew in the early days. Not so active in crew nowadays. In fact, I'm not sure whether my subs are paid up. But anyway, I'm speaking here as an individual, not on behalf of crew. Before you, or what you'll be discussing over the next wee while, is the two scientific reports. You have, on one hand, the Jacobs report, which cost you all a considerable amount of money, and the DeLonghi report, which was essentially free to the council and ratepayers. They're both written by experts. They've both been peer reviewed. And under the holistic heading of science, to include, you'd really have to include both on the LIMS if you are going to include any. There is still an argument, a scientific argument on this coast, why bother? Apart from some small sections of Raumati South, I've yet to be shown, in 20 years of looking at this, where we have a serious problem from coastal erosion, now or into the future. There's a lot of modelling going on. Yes, we'll get some small episodic incursions, but generally we all know that this is an accretionary coast. The Jacobs report is very conservative, and it analyses the high-end negative scenarios, which it's really has to do under the terms or under the interpretation of the present government guidelines and New Zealand coastal policies. Some would say it's a misinterpretation, but really they have to follow that. At that high-end scenario, it becomes a bit of a doom and gloom report. They did place emphasis on the passive inundation model, which I won't go into the detail, is commonly referred to as the Bruin rule, which just does not work on a coast with a significant littoral drift. And we've been through this in the past. We went through it with the expert panel on the Shand report. It was thrown out, you just can't use it. but it's a very common algorithm that's used because it's very easy to perform. There's a number of good aspects in the Jacobs report. The use of the bathtub model, it's all worth a read. Conversely, the DeLonghi report, I find scientifically, and I'm probably a little bit biased, is much more balanced, much more pragmatic, and is probably more worthy of inclusion on LIMS than the Jacobs report in some respects. Both of them use DSAS, I'm trying to remember what it is, Digital Shoreline Analysis System, developed by the USGS. There's a good degree of concordance between the two reports when they use this data, and I understand they used slightly different data sets, which is really good scientifically.
Sorry, Jeff, you've just got about 30 more seconds.
Yep. So if you're going to include anything on the LIMS, you really should scientifically include both reports. And that's where I stand. I hate to say it, but you may end up with some problems, scientific litigation and stuff like that, if you start lumping one into the other. I don't know why. I find it quite bizarre that the officers have chosen not to include DeLonghi's report, but that's where I stand.
Great, thank you for your comments. Yeah, we have a couple of questions, I think, Jeff. Thank you. First, Councillor Coe.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Useful comments. So the current situation is we have a link on the LIM reports to both reports. It goes to a website that has both reports on it, the DeLonghi report and the Jacobs report. So what the issue that we are debating is whether that is sufficient or whether something needs to go directly on the LIMS.
Right.
So, given that this is a complex issue and you're saying that we need to reference both, am I correct in assuming that you would, on balance, probably prefer the status quo, which is to have a link to both reports plus other information that is not directly on the LIMS, or is that a step too far?
Possibly my first, where I'd sit first, would be to not even say it, mention it, neither of them.
Yeah.
Why bother? But, okay, you have obligations under legislation and stuff like that. If you're going to include one over the other, I think you're opening a can of worms for yourselves.
Yeah.
That's all that I can see is
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
It's
Yeah, thank
comes
you for
from
that.
the past.
Next up, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just first off, Jeff, I wanted to say thank you for introducing the term accretion into the vocabulary here. You were the first person I heard use that, and it's been used ever since, and now we understand what that is. My question was just along a similar line. Either if you were given a choice that they both go on or they both come off, which would you pick?
I'd both go off at the moment.
Right.
It's not a serious issue at the moment. It may turn into a serious issue in the future, but you guys have 10-year plans and you can pop it in when you see fit. Really, at the moment? You know, we throw everything. Science throws everything at weather forecasting. We have all the data in the world. And can we get it right 10 days out? And you're asking modelers on a very complex situation where we don't have a lot of information on things like sediment budget out here to make predictions 50 years hence, 100 years hence. It's getting a bit bizarre. If I've got enough time, I may make one more comment. You've got to be careful with a lot of these science reports, and I'm sometimes guilty of it myself. We introduce a degree of accuracy in these reports which just is not there. We start mentioning 263 properties in this area of Otaki will be affected by in 30 years. Well, that's just BS.
Yeah.
It's anywhere from 0 to 400.
Yeah.
It's not 263. And by using that, you're introducing a degree of accuracy in everybody's heads anybody who reads it, they sort of, oh, my man, they've got this nailed down. But in reality, and we all know, it's just not there.
Yeah.
That accuracy in those long-term models is not there.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. One more question, Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Jeff, for coming along to talk today. So, a couple of thoughts that are going through my mind. And so, in terms of the Jacobs report, I thought that report was only to be used for planning, whereas it's been tied up with our limbs. That's the first little bit. The other bit is too, so you're saying about, so there's a conversation around whether the Jacob report should be on the limbs or whether the other one should be or whether they neither should be. Do you know if, with your background and your interest in this area, do you know if KCDC has sought expert advice to actually really provide good advice on which report or either report should be
I
on?
couldn't comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure that's maybe a question
okay,
should
then
be directed
about
to
the
Jeff.
planning component of it. The
I
Jacobs
can't
report.
comment on that. I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
Just on the science. I'm
Okay.
just solely
Okay.
on the science.
Okay, thank you.
And we appreciate you bringing that expertise to the table. It's been, really beneficial having your comments in this
Right.
forum. So thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually was just going to say the same thing. Thanks, Jeff. You might have thought you didn't come in at the right time. I think you've come in at the absolutely best time.
Right.
I really appreciate it.
So is there going to be more discussion about this?
Yeah,
As-
so
as
the
we-
6th of March is
Yeah.
when, there'll be another conversation about the specific issue of what's included on the limbs. Yeah.
Right. 'Cause-
Yeah, if the motion here today passes, is
Yeah.
successful. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't mind sitting down and talking to you all about.
Well, feel free to come back on the 6th of March.
Right.
Yeah. thanks for coming
Okay.
along, Jeff. All right, and last public speaker, we've got Steve Tomlinson.
Good morning.
Morena, over to you.
Okay. I came here today in support of Councillor Cooper's motion, which of course has been postponed to a date sometime in the future, rather than perhaps use the motion strategically. At the December strategy meeting, I tried to point out to this committee that following its deliberations, it seemed uncomfortable with KCDC's continued fundamentalist support for the Jacobs report in the face of the obvious impossible financial consequences of that report to Council and its desire to ignore the science contained in the DeLange report. This committee then had an opportunity to resist the Council's direction back to a level of common sense, but instead voted for its continuance strategically. Unsurprisingly, there is a name for this management mytopia. It's called sunk cost fallacy. Investing money, time, or resources, here it is all three, into a decision when it's clear that it isn't working, simply because the organisation has already invested so much money, time, and resources. But here it is your ratepayers, not Council, since they are the ones who pay every cent of all three of those costs. At least Glenn Cooper and Nigel Wilson were prepared to try to kick the trend, follow the science, see the logic, and try to do something. Of course, the motion of Councillor Cooper was just seeking something that your ratepayers were asking for, but KCDC were ignoring. That it takes judicial review proceedings to cause this council to take any action makes a mockery of the council's stated have your say policy on your website that we value your input on projects, strategies and bylaws that impact our community. So, moving forward, perhaps the next strategy meeting could place on its agenda a motion considering whether the relief sought by Crew, which in my mind is simply affording the DeLange report the same relevance as the Jacobs report, is reasonable when compared with the legal costs that your ratepayers would be expected to pay by KCDC vigorously defending, because always the publications from Council, when they're faced with this, we are vigorously defending vigorously defending the undefendable, since equality is only what the majority of ratepayers want and what the motion sought. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Have we got questions from the table? I'm not seeing any questions. I feel like you made your points very succinctly and eloquently. So, yeah, that's...
Thank you. I have no other questions myself.
Okay. Oh, and perfectly on time too. Thanks, Stephen. Okay, that's all our public speakers this morning. So moving on to deputations, of which there are none, members' business, leaves of absence, not aware of any, or just make the Mayor's Office aware if you have notice of a leave. Matters of emergent nature also have not been made aware of any. We are now going to move item 9.1, which is Councillor Glenn Cooper's notice of motion, up before the update section on our agenda, as Councillor Cooper does have to exit the meeting at around 11 for an x-ray on his leg, which he just, So, yeah, I believe now I'll pass over to Councillor Cooper to introduce his notice of motion, item 9.1.
Thank you, Sophie. So I would like to explain why I've brought this motion. First, I don't believe that staff were ever going to attach the report without a motion by elected members. So in that sense, the motion forces a decision. I actually wanted to bring a motion to have the Dr. De Lange Coastal Hazard Report endorsed in an appropriate hazard section to the LIM. This motion was not accepted by the CE, subject to standing orders, and Darren suggested a more appropriate resolution giving Council the opportunity to inform and give direction to elected members. So as part of good decision making, open and transparent governance, I agreed this was a logical and appropriate course of action. Hence the change of motion, and hence the misunderstanding possibly in the public as to the motion today. I'll quickly outline a few points of why I'm directing staff, or wanting to direct staff, to spend time and energy and attaching the De Lange report onto the LIMS. So just bear with me, indulge me for a second. A LIM is about transparency of information that exists to give buyers, property owners, the full picture, including all known hazards and risks of a property. The law requires council to disclose all relevant information they hold, it's hold in brackets, not just the reports they prefer. Dr. De Lange's Coastal Hazard Report provides scientifically backed data that challenges assumptions of Jacob's report and is directly relevant to coastal hazard, peer-reviewed and meets coastal planning statutory threshold. In fact, the only coastal hazard report KCDC hold. It is my understanding much of the data used for the De Lange report was supplied by council, to which Dr. De Lange was extremely grateful of, and he expressed his thanks to council for that. Including the Dr. De Lange Coastal Hazard Report and LIMS, we ensure property buyers and owners can make informed decisions based on all available evidence, not just one side of the story, reports and information filtered by council. What your view, or the view of KCDC, on the science of Jacobs versus De Lange is actually not relevant, and you need to understand that. This is not relevant to whether it should be on the LIM or not. If council holds the information, it is relevant to coastal hazard, it should be on the LIM. That's it, and not a link. If we look at the purpose of a LIM, ensures transparency in property transactions, identifies natural hazards and risks, provide official council records, assist development, land use and planning, and limit legal liability for councils. The information is predominantly held for the purpose of property purchases. Information included in LIMS must come from records held by the Territorial Authority, as specified under Section 44A of LGOIMA. However, councils are not required to independently verify or commission reports to obtain this information. They only need to provide what they already have on record, that is, hold. There is a host of reports and information on LIMS that are not KCDC's information, commissioned by KCDC, asked for by KCDC, but they do hold. Examples of information on LIMS that are held by council but not council's information. GNS science reports, NIWA reports, regional hazard assessments, geotechnical environment reports, historical land contamination, infrastructure utilities, water, electricity, highway information from Wakatahi, building resource consents, climate environmental data. Information, in fact, most of what is on LIMS is not actually council information. It's just information that council holds, mostly from other organisations. The question is not where or who provided the reports, but whether council hold, in brackets, information, and is it relevant to the LIM pursuant to section 44 of Lagoima. It would be my submission that council do hold the DeLonghi report. It is relevant to coastal hazard and should be on the LIMS. If council is selectively including one report while downplaying another, this can be seen as biased information management. The Auckland High Court Weir v Kapiti Coast District Council 2013 ruled that councils must include all relevant hazard information at LIMS even if disputed. The ruling reinforces that scientific disagreement is not a valid reason to exclude or downplay hazard reports that council holds. North Shore City Council v Body Corporate 2010, Moot v Clark Boyce 92, Barfoot Thompson Limited vs Real Estate 2014 all support all case law that supports the DeLonghi report being on the LIM, fair and open, unbiased disclosure. By excluding the Dr. DeLonghi report while presenting the Jacobs report, KCDC may be misrepresenting hazards to property buyers. Prospective buyers and property owners should have access to all known held scientific perspectives on coastal hazards. The Jacobs report and the Dr. DeLonghi report provide different perspectives on coastal hazard. And simply a web link is not appropriate. It should be contained on the LIM as per directions of section 44A of the Lagoima. This creates an impression of certainty where scientific debate exists, potentially misleading property buyers and failing to provide them with a complete picture of coastal hazards. Homeowners, buyers and developers deserve full access to all hazard information that councils hold, not just one viewpoint. Failing to incorporate the Dr. DeLonghi report undermines transparency and trust in the council's decision-making process. The inclusion of this report is a matter of fairness, ensuring that KCDC is not seen as endorsing one report over another, but instead acting as a neutral provider of information. The LIM should not endorse any report, it should simply provide factual information. A web link is not legally equivalent to direct inclusion in a LIM. Many buyers may only look at LIM documents and not external links. If providing a link is enough, why doesn't the council just link Jacobs or other reports to a link? Why is anything on a LIM? Why aren't there just a whole bunch of links? Would be my question. The law requires that hazard information be included in LIMs, not just referenced externally. A report that is important enough to link is important enough to include. This is as much about trust and confidence and the council being a neutral conveyor of information as anything else. Someone asked me the other day the pros and cons of the Dr. DeLonghi report on the LIMs. I could give them lots of pros, but actually struggled to find any cons. This motion is my motion. I believe it's the right thing to do, but I will say in summary is that when I speak to members of the public and explain the Dr. DeLonghi report and LIMs and Jacobs, every single person cannot understand why it is not on LIMs, and they often ask the why, which I can't actually answer. And finally, we're here to support communities that vote us in, to do what's in the best thing for those communities. We should be thankful for organisations such as CREW and other members of the public who often at their own personal expense, families, financial and reputation, put themselves out there, advocate, bring issues to the forefront, fight for what they believe is right and just, not for themselves, but for the communities they live in. Today's vote should be an easy one to bring it back for a formal decision and a formal vote at the next meeting. And I would sincerely hope that the recommendation will be to adopt the Dr. DeLonghi in the appropriate hazard section on our LIMs. Sorry, it was a bit of a spiel, but I don't bring many motions, so I thought I'd use up my time.
That's okay. That's okay, Councillor Cooper. We will, though, pretty much take that as your right of introduction when we find a seconder. But first, if there are any questions for Councillor Cooper, as the person who's brought the motion, the question should be directed to him.
I don't have a
Councillor
question,
Coe?
but I thought we were going straight into debate.
Are there any questions? Oh, sorry, Jeff. If you can
can't.
hold that for the break, and you can have a chat with Glenn then. I think Councillor Wilson, were you hoping to second? Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Bede had a question. We'll just flow with this.
I don't mind asking it later, but that's cool. So I just had a question in terms of clarifying, because my understanding was that the Jacobs report is already on our LIMS and has been for a while, but I took from Councillor Coe's comment that I'm asking a question, if you don't mind. Well, I'm having to respond to a councillor who's interrupting. I'm asking a question.
Okay. Yeah.
So Councillor Coe appeared to be stating that both of those reports would be, or the Jacobs report is attached on a link. So I'm not sure. Can we clarify, where does Jacobs report currently sit and how is it accessed? That's my question.
Is it appropriate? Yeah, Councillor Cooper, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's an appropriate question for Chris.
As this is a notice of motion from elected members, this is.
I would like that
for us.
clarification, but what I would say to that response, if you look at case law and you look at section 44 of Lagoima, they should both be treated the same and they should both be on the limb. Now, the argument around the benefits, pros or cons of, or deficiencies of Jacobs is a completely different argument. This is the argument around what's true and fair and transparent for people, or for limbs. So they should be treated the same. They should both be on the limbs. If that's not the case, they should be.
Yes, it would be.
Yes.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah, and good question and good point as well. Councillor Coe.
Look, I would just like to read out what is currently on the LIMS for clarification, if that's all right. And thanks to Darren for sending it through. Here's what it says. Council holds a set of reports prepared by environmental engineering consultancy Jacobs NZ Limited covering susceptibility and vulnerability assessments of the coastal areas of the district based on a range of sea level rise scenarios over periods of 30, 50 and 100 years. The Council intends using these reports to inform future district plan work, which will consider any necessary changes to land use and subdivision controls in areas which may be affected. Various parties have raised concerns regarding the approach taken in these reports. Those concerns will be addressed during consideration of the submissions received during the plan change process. The information on coastal hazards that the Council holds is available on the following link, blah. And on that link is the DeLonghi report and the Jacobs report. So there is just a link on the LIMS to both reports. So they currently have equal status in terms of access. So I hope that clarifies it. So, and I just would like to make some further comments. I mean, I'm a coastal property owner. I'm also a property investor. I've bought and sold a number of properties over the years, and are we in debate or?
Well, it's been moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Wilson, and we took. Yeah, sorry, this has gotten a tiny bit messy, but it has been moved and seconded, and Councillor Cooper's comments before were taken as his right of introduction, so you're happy for now
Right.
for us to be in debate.
So I would just like to put forward my point of view, and I really must have to say I really appreciated Jeff's comments this morning. But I have used LIM reports extensively in my time as a property investor. I'm well networked into other property investors as well. The purpose of obtaining a LIM report when you purchase a property is so you know the risks. It's not to get a whole lot of extraneous information. If there is no risk, there should be nothing on the LIM. Because the purpose of having something on the LIM is to clearly specify that if you purchase this property, you need to be aware that there is a defined risk in this particular area. If there is no risk, I really like Jeff's approach, then don't put anything on there if that's what we truly believe. And so I think quite honestly, I see this. My preference would be to have nothing on my limb, and I'm sure other people in the community who are worried about their insurance claims and, council spending millions on coastal erosion, whatever, would be more than happy to have nothing on their limbs as well. What about the people in Rikarangi, for example? Do they want something like this on their limb reports? Because at the moment, that statement I read out is on every limb in Kapiti. So we have to bear in mind that every limb in Kapiti would have this information on it potentially, unless we're going to try and single out properties, which I think would be a recipe for disaster if we're singling out properties that have reference to that risk. If there is no risk, there should be nothing on the limb. So if we truly believe that the DeLonghi report is valid and it's saying that there's basically negligible risk from coastal erosion, then why have anything on the limbs at all? So in my view, it would be it's a waste of ratepayers' money to be further exploring this issue. If we are going to explore it, I would certainly like to have the option of looking at the scenario where we either remove everything off the limbs or we modify the wording that is currently on the limbs to remove direct reference to the Jacobs report, and that we talk about there being some debate around coastal erosion. We don't mention Jacobs specifically, so everything gets treated equally, and there's the link over to all the relevant information on coastal erosion. And honestly, I feel really strongly about this. I do not want something directly on my limb. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wilson.
I was actually quite impressed and somewhat surprised by the ardent advocacy for the removal of Jacobs from the limb from Councillor Coe. I agree with you, actually. But there's a couple of points that are made there, that they're not equal, and the DeLonghi report isn't extraneous information. And the reason they're not equal is because even though there's a link, there's might be a link to both reports, one is really specific. That information is actually on the limb. So the Jacobs reference is directly there, right? That's what the bit that you were, that's the bit, no, the report's not, but the reference to the importance of the report is. And that, I think, is a problem. I take the point that was made by Jeff Ashby that both are written by experts and both have been peer reviewed. Section 44, as we heard from Glenn. So both of them are either off or both of them on. But they are equal. I see them as equal reports at this stage. So either they're both on or they're both not. One of the things I'd like to see is, because I don't own loads of properties, I don't get LIM reports. I'd really like to see a LIM report, like an exemplar of a LIM report that we can all have a look at. I mean, it could be redacted in terms of the address and names and stuff, but just an exemplar of what people out there are actually receiving, so that we can see it and make a judgment on that basis. The last point, I've been friends with a number of the crew people for quite a long time, including the late Christopher Ruth. I am disappointed, and you will use this forum to say so, I'm disappointed that they've jumped the gun with a judicial review. That is going to cost ratepayers an enormous amount of money. I think, and the reason I'm disappointed is because crew were aware of this notice of motion, which I think is an important notice of motion, and I think it heads us in the right direction. So to now be faced, the reason I'm raising this is because I'd be really disappointed if councillors thought, oh, well, there's going to be a judicial review, so there's nothing we can do, yada, yada. No, I don't agree with that at all. I think we need to make a decision on motion, what's right on this motion, and judicial reviews are a separate issue for me.
Mayor Holborough.
Kia ora tātou. I'll be supporting this motion today. I think it's a good way forward because there's clearly some disagreement and also some lack of clarity around what's on the LIMS, what are our legal obligations, and we can just get some definitive answers. I think any further kind of debate or questions would be best left until we have the information in front of us. This is a long-term fraught issue. I was around as a community board member when Crew were opposing having the Shand report on the LIMS, and we're now 10 years down the track and we're still having this discussion about what should be on, what should be off, what constitutes a hazard, what are our legal obligations, and what form should that take on the LIMS. So I'll hold any further comment until that paper comes back, and I look forward to finding an acceptable resolution to this whole issue. So thanks for bringing the notice of motion. I think it's a positive way forward.
Yeah, and thanks for those comments around reminding us of what today's notice of motion's intention is, and that's to bring a report back to kind of more formally have this conversation to then make a decision about what is or isn't included on the LIMS. So as the Mayor said, it's kind of more of a direction setting type of motion. So if we can keep that in mind. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. It's a fraught situation, this one. Comparing last triennium to this triennium, this was a very, very hard tackle with regards to things. We couldn't have had the conversation we're currently having here last triennium, and I'm very thankful that we've been able to crack that nut with regards to, and I've mentioned this before, with regards to taking a more positive, proactive approach to actually trying to get some resolution in this space. I appreciate that we're going through a plan change for coastal, which will obviously be centred around hazards as well. But that process does take a while, and this has been a lingering sore for a long time. So just by the conversation around the table today, and I'd also like to say thank you, Jeff, your comments were fantastic, is that everyone wants this conversation, from what I can see. So I think the appropriate pathway to do this is exactly what Glenn's doing with regards to going to working with the CEO with regards to the correct pathway to do that. We've already had some questions with regards to some additional information we'd like to see. I'd also like to see a LIM and exactly what it looks like, and have that discussion about treating both these documents as equals or not, but have that discussion and get some definite outcome, one way or the other. And I think this is the correct process to do that. So I'll certainly be supporting the motion. Thank you for bringing it to the table, Glenn. But I'm just also grateful that you've got the environment here this triennium that you can bring this to the table and for it to be constructively debated and worked through, as has been the case this triennium as well. Not so much in my opinion with the last one, but certainly in this one. That might be a direct criticism, but we've been able to get this conversation moving, and that does tie into that coastal plan change. But I'll be supporting the motion as we move forward.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So I certainly agree that we need to understand what is actually on a LIM. And so Councillor Coe has said that she's seen a copy of one. I'm not sure that, I don't think we, other councillors have. So I think it's really important to know what is on one. I also know that the wording does change on them. And so we need to understand how that happens as well. And so even if one does come to us, tweaks are made to them, I know that. So we need to have full clarity about when those changes are made and what, I suppose, what the main document is. And I will be supporting this. I think we do need to have a really good conversation about what is on those LIMS. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pravanov. Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for bringing this motion. I think this is about clarity. And what I heard from our public speakers this morning is there's a bit of confusion over what is taking place, what has been taking place. And so I think this motion does provide us with an opportunity to bring clarity both to ourselves but also to the Kapiti Coast District public. So thanks, Glenn, for that. And also, I just want to thank Darren also for helping us with making sure that we're making good governance decisions here, not just ones that are based out of emotion, but we're actually getting good information to make good decisions about what's best for our community. I note that my understanding was that the table was pretty clear that we wanted the DeLonghi report referenced on LIMS, which it has happened, which is an improvement. Now we're moving probably to the next step of the debate of how much of that content is actually on the LIMS rather than just referenced from it. So that's a whole nother story and probably sits in, as you've referenced, the Lagoima section 44.A on what council holds and how much we have to put on to notify people. So I look forward to that debate and getting all the information that we need as it comes to March 6th, so that we can get clarity both for ourselves to make a good decision and for our communities to understand the process that we've followed. So thank you.
Great, really good end to debate, I feel like. Right of reply, Councillor Cooper. Anything brief you want to say just to sum things up?
Yeah, just concur with Lawrence in respect to the sea. When I initially spoke to Darren around this motion, we sort of both agree that strategy and ops may have been a good venue for it. I was always of the opinion that I wanted to come to the full meeting. I put it to strategy and ops, but there just wasn't simply enough time to get the appropriate direction for us. So I was supportive of Darren's suggestion to push it out and get that good advice. Just want to push back on one thing that Liz said. She thinks, or she is, that the Dr. Long report, because it's, in her view, has got no risk for the community, then it shouldn't be on there. I've read the report and it does actually talk about risk. But in terms of LIM, is you're legally required to prevent all hazard information in LIM. It's a legal requirement. It's not, we don't get to choose. We have to do what the law tells us. And the law says that we have to use all relevant information. Whether the report confirms, challenges or contradicts existing hazard assessments, it still affects how property buyers, property owners and property developers understand risk, hence the law. The argument that Dr. Long's report identifies a lack of hazard is not a reason to exclude it. It is actually a reason to include it. Councils must disclose all relevant information with increases, decreases, and failing to do so compromises transparency and a breach of obligations under Lagoima. So it's an argument that doesn't actually stand up, and we'll see what direction we get from council, but I suspect that will be the direction. So let's get the advice from council. Let's listen to it and make our decisions at the appropriate meeting. So hopefully you'll support the meeting, support the motion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Okay, do you want us to record? Oh, well, that's recorded anyway. We don't need to do a division. Yeah, okay. So we'll just record the abstention. All right, so that's carried. Great, thank you. How are people feeling? Do we want a quick break or do we just... Okay, just, yeah, maybe yeah, we'll go for a 10-minute break then, come back at 10:30.
Can I make a quick comment now we're on break?
Oh, yep, go for it, yep.